All right, I think we're ready. Okay, we'll get right into it. Thank you all for coming. I think this is going to be a great panel. I'm Reed Albergotti. I'm the technology editor for Semafor. I'm just going to introduce our awesome panel today. We have Jeremy Wertheimer, who is the founder of ITA originally, which was sold to Google in 2010. He's now visiting scientist at the Broad Institute, which, if you don't know about, is an amazing institution. And he's also the founder of Biological Engineering Ventures, which invests in all sorts of interesting startups using AI and other technology. We have Rasmus Rothe, who is the co-founder of Merantix, which is an investment studio focused on AI. And we have Evelyne Bischof, who is the medical director at the Sheba Longevity Center, and also the senior physician at the Renji University Hospital in Shanghai. So let's get into it. As a technology reporter, we cover software, we cover social media. It's actually a really exciting time because the software, the bits, as they say, is starting to control the atoms. So the real world is changing. And there's so many promising technologies, everything from biotech to material sciences, which is going to be so important for our health, curing diseases, and also surviving on this planet in a changing climate. So I thought I'd start with Jeremy. You've been around for a while in this field. The Broad Institute has been doing this probably longer than anybody. And I hope you could just sort of separate the hype from reality for us. Like, what is real and what is just science fiction at this point?
So, a very difficult question. And let me explain why. Because it requires a nuanced answer. It's very hard. When I've seen people this week say, oh, it's all great. Well, not quite. So people say, oh, it's all hype. Well, not quite. And so to me, I do both engineering and science. And in engineering, for me, that's when we basically know what we're doing. As long as we do it right, it will work. Science, we're discovering. We don't know. And I think what can be confusing, and I haven't heard many people get it right, is things cross over between science and engineering in ways that are hard to understand. So as an example, I started out as an engineer, as an electrical engineer. We understand electrical engineering very well. And I can prove it to you that I have a device now in my pocket. You have one too. And this device, this would have been science fiction at any point until a couple of years ago. Absolute science fiction. What can this device do? I run a large language model on it. It understands my voice. It's crazy, right? But this is engineering. We predicted this all along. We knew what we were doing. We were following a certain path. Science is different because science, you make discoveries. And you can work really, really hard, and then you can miss it, right? Because maybe it's harder than you think, right? Some things we can cure, and some things we still can't because they're complicated. We don't understand biology. We didn't make biology, right? It's complicated. We're discovering it. The weird thing is, on my phone right now, most of it's engineering, but that large language model, it's actually not engineering. That large language model is science. We didn't invent it. We discovered it, right? When we now train a model, it's not like I built every part, I know how it works. It's like, no. I go through a process. I take a very large thing. When I was doing my PhD in artificial intelligence at MIT, I minored in neuroscience. I love neuroscience. But there was a difference. Engineering and neuroscience are very different. Now they're not that different because the model is more like a neuroscience project than like an engineering project. And my proof to you of this is nobody can tell me how it works. And nobody can tell me if the next one's going to work better or not. So I've been in this field since I was a teenager for 40 years. And I can tell you that the step from GPT 3.5 to GPT 4 was the most remarkable thing I've ever seen in my life. And yet, from GPT 4, 10 months till now, it's been nice, but not as big. And I know a lot of the people who do this. I knew everybody at Google. I know a lot of people. They're all very, very smart. They're all working very hard. They have tremendous resource. And yet, if you look at progress, nobody can predict because it's science. Yeah. And anyway, so to me, like, there's hype versus yes. People hype stuff. It happens. It's human psychology. Smart people figure it out. But you have to know: are you looking at like I'm building the next train, or like I'm curing the next disease? And when those cross over, just be careful. You know what you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, we have, there are some really interesting things happening. In silico, for instance, I just interviewed the CEO a couple weeks ago. They've got the first AI-created drug in phase 2 clinical trials. They're in the longevity space. Evelyne, you're in the longevity space. What can we expect as consumers, as patients, in terms of longevity medicine? This is like going after the cells that create aging, right? As if we're going after a virus or something. I mean, tell us what's coming. Give us the more optimistic, view.
With pleasure. First of all, thank you so much, for having me here. Healthy longevity medicine, as we call it now, we call it healthy longevity medicine because we want to make a very big distinction between longevity, lifespan, life extension, and healthy longevity, health span, optimizing health span so that people that anyway live longer, because we are all going to live longer, and that's not because of longevity science, it's because of the trend and how we live and so on. So it's pure sociology. In silico medicine is a great example of what I hope will be the future and what already is happening. As patients, we are all facing aging. We are all aging. So if we would see aging as a disease, we are all patients. That's why I refer mostly to everyone as patients. And healthy longevity is looking at the processes of aging in order to somehow intervene to make aging less as a reason for us to be very sick at the last part of our lives. Some of the drugs that are now being developed with AI, and this is one of the things that I really love. Generative AI has been around for a long time in terms of chemical medicine and designing the molecules, new molecules in the field. But one practical example of what we can expect very soon is exactly that. AI-based predicted molecules are being synthesized and are now already in phase 2B clinical trial. That's the last moment before it will go to the people all over in trials within less than 10 years with instead $20 billion under 20 million. And they target both a disease and aging. So we will have the so-called dual targets and more of those. And on the other hand, we are seeing very good development of senolytics, a group of medication, I would say, or group of compounds that will intervene on cells that are aging wrongly, that are causing us to have the diseases of aging. So that's a fact that's happening, and I'm really excited about that.
And, this stuff is so exciting. But if you compare it to what investors in Silicon Valley, are used to, it's pretty high risk. You talk about clinical trials. I mean, that stuff, the percentage of success is so low. So, Rasmus, I thought I would ask you in this general, topic, how do you tell what's a good investment, what's going to actually make money, and what is actually more like a university research project?
Yeah, also to your points earlier, I think this becomes much more fuzzy. And a lot of this is like very high risk, but also high reward. So I think there's now kind of the obvious like LLM use cases. It's like basically mostly like text-based things, quite narrow desk-related tasks that people are doing. I think you can build a ton of companies there right now. So replace basically all kinds of white-collar experts, and that's great. And obviously there you need to be a bit careful and figure out like what are the big cloud providers pushing with their horizontal platform. Whenever OpenAI and others have been releasing some new features, there's probably like 500 startups that die the same day. So I think like our perspective on this is like go in like deep verticals where you need domain expertise, go to market excellence, where it is still like a huge industry. Obviously it needs to be a big market, but it's not something where when there's just another generic productivity tool you get suddenly disrupted, because that stuff is all commoditized. So going into these deep verticals. And then what we are also very interested in is as kind of now the intersection to the physical world and like many more modalities, because like a lot of the LLMs right now, if it's text-based, it's very like when you have a task at a desk and you get text and you work with that and you output text, like maybe what some lawyers and people in marketing do, like that stuff I think is today. And now it's just about building applications. I think the next frontier will be to connect this much more with the physical world. So adding much more modalities to the models. I mean, people are working with that, like dealing with different data types from materials, from biotech, but also what we're really excited about is robotics. So we're all talking about white-collar disruption, but I think we're underestimating what is coming right now on the robotic sides, where when we talk about anything in the blue-collar work or in the physical world, where right now humans do tasks, and in robotics, it's been still a bit clunky in the last 1 or 2 decades, but with some of these new model developments, we're starting to be able to teach robots much quicker to new tasks and make it much more robust. And I think that has great opportunities in obviously manufacturing, but also in elderly care, in the services industry, maybe also at your home. So I think that's something we're very interested from a technical perspective, but also from a business side.
Yeah. I think part of what you're doing probably is watching as stuff goes from the university lab and becomes sort of commercializable, right? If that's a word. So I wanted to ask you all sort of what do you think we need? What are the resources that this kind of technology, let's say in biotech, requires in order to make the leap toward reality? I mean, Evelyne, maybe you're a good person to ask about this.
I think we have also good tools of AI that can help us to predict the outcomes of some of the things, such as clinical trials. So the risk of putting the lot on the right compound is less. And also, the translation really from the lab to humans has always been slow, and it's very over-regulated. That's a bottleneck. Even in the field of any intervention that we want to do, even if it's not medical in terms of pharmacologics, we are extremely limited by rules that have been made prior to AI and prior to anything that was in even the first wave of AI in the society. And I think what we can learn from those countries where it's still regulated but updated, such as UAE or China, is that really giving or empowering physicians, those people who work directly with end mile, with people, is bringing the biggest and the fastest progress.
You mentioned China. Actually, there's something really interesting happening where, if you talk to the AI and drug discovery people, they come up with these ideas for molecules on their laptops, and computers. They're probably more powerful than laptops. But then they send it out often to China to be synthesized and sort of tested, right, in a lab. So is China, you're spending a lot of time there? Is that what's it like? Is this going to lead to a new wave of innovation there? Do you think, or do they have an advantage for that reason?
Yes, I mean China has changed a lot. So. There is a stigma and there is a bias of people who are not right now working there or not collaborating closely. Ethical rules in China are very, very strict, much stricter than what I know from Switzerland or America, where I also work intensively. On the other hand, it's very innovation friendly. So we can really do more in terms of if we have a biopsy robot, we can partner with a company that will teach the AI how to pinpoint the needle in the right point so we don't go through pancreas. And those things have been established a long time ago. And another thing that is very powerful, in my opinion, I feel extremely stupid when I see my students who in the night go and play with machine learning and program something on the side. They're all doctors. Like me, I had no idea about AI before I entered longevity, and so I think where a country is investing in innovation and in the new generation, that's where we will see the biggest progress, I guess.
There's another phenomenon that's happening in this whole frontier technology space, which is there are these resources that are being created and sort of open source, and I think AlphaFold is probably the most famous example. At DeepMind, where they've I don't know, it's debatable how solved the protein folding problem is, but Jeremy, tell me what is AlphaFold meant and projects like that meant to the field?
Okay, so again, apologize, a nuanced answer, right? Because it's so, and I'll give the history. So back when I was in grad school 30 years ago, protein structure prediction was a problem we all tried. Right? It was a great problem, and it was very hard because you could define it really well. For computer scientists, it's easy. Biology is messy. But oh, look, I've got a sequence of amino acids, and I've got a 3D structure. Great, I have an input and output. Let me try. And we could all do a little bit. We couldn't do very well. Short story, years later, and again, I know the AlphaFold guys, they did it, brilliant work, great work. But understand from what perspective? From the perspective of, I don't have anything, now I have something, it's amazing. From the perspective of, I want to take a drug forward, okay, so how accurate are their predictions? Well, look, they got that structure, and look, everybody says it's great. Okay, so what is the error? Well, the error is, the way you measure the error on a molecule is how far is each atom from where it's supposed to be, and what's the distance, right? And you take the statistic over all the molecules, and so you say, on average, what's the mean, error, right? And the units are angstroms, right? This is the length of, a molecule. And so, you could say, oh, look, AlphaFold 1, AlphaFold 2, they're great. Look, the error's down to like 1 angstrom, right? So for most of us, wow, look, that's the same molecule. For a medicinal chemist, why even bothering me? That's not even close. That's not even in the, I need down to like, a tiny, tiny fraction of that. And so all that, like, that's very nice, but that's like impressionist paintings. That's not like the precision I need to go to. Not even, forget people, even just, I'm not even gonna go sacrifice a mouse for that because it's, so to me, the problem is, what's the perspective? From the perspective of, have they done, like, wow, when I was in grad school, that would have been amazing, right? And is Demis going to get a Nobel Prize one day? Maybe. He would deserve it. I've had the privilege, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 people with Nobel Prizes, right? And yeah, no, it's great work. It's very influential work. But when even nature is like, wow, we've solved the problem, you haven't really solved the problem. Solving the problem would be, oh, we now take the results and you go into clinic and it works. Or even just go into a mouse and it works. We're not there. Right now, again, a lot of my friends, and again, I do some of this work, and a bunch of my friends, there was a year when several of my friends, they each raised $300 million and did a drug discovery, AI drug discovery company, and I basically said, that's great. I said, I'll check back in 3 years and see how you all did with that. And some of these things moving forward, if you go to a pharma person and you say, oh, look, and we've gotten to phase 4, that's very nice. Tell me when you've actually gotten your drug approved. Right? Again, if you go to an early stage guy, it's like, tell me when you've cured a mouse, and then I'll talk to you. Until then, you've done a computational thing, I don't care. Right? Okay, but for a pharma guy, like mouse is very nice, not a big market to go treat mice. Tell me when you can like treat, a British man, which is like the next,
But this kind of changes, sorry to interrupt, but so it kind of changes the whole idea though, right? Which is like, it's not about precision. It's about, when it comes to it's about creating a bunch of targets, right?
No, it's about both. It's about both. I need a bunch of targets, but realize that to get the reason why it costs billions of dollars to make a drug, it's not like that molecule costs $1 billion. It's how many misses did I have for the one hit. That's why the number is so big, right? Because to get one done, you do many, many, many. Right? Okay, so let's say AI, I can do a few fewer, right? So maybe instead of taking $2 billion in 12 years, maybe they'll take $6 billion in 10 years. Huge advance, but that's not like, oh, we just take it from the program and stick it right in your arm. Now, there are fields where you can do that, and we all did it, I hope, right? The COVID vaccine. And that was technology, again, before you guys, everybody in the world tuned in, that for more than 10 years, right down the block from me, for more than 10 years, that was like a crazy technology you would not have invested in and you would have been right. Nobody knew what to do with mRNA. This is like a hammer looking for a nail. COVID comes along, and within a week of getting from China the sequence, of understanding the pathogen and getting the sequence, within a week, with computer programs, I won't call it AI, but you had a candidate, and within a year we were all getting shots, which is amazing. Right? And so, to me, there are things that can move quickly. Right now, we just had the first gene therapy approved. And this is stuff people had worked on for decades, right? But now you've got a gene therapy approved, right? These things don't have to take that long, right? And so, when you're trying to make a molecule that has a particular 3D structure, and the chemistry, we do the chemistry, and the chemistry's hard. But then, okay, that's the easy part. Now it's biology. Biology is like cells and organisms and tissues and stuff we don't understand and complex. And looks, it worked in the mouse, but like people are not mice, it's different, right? And even like it works in men doesn't mean it works in women, right? I mean, it's different, right? And so there's all that complexity. And so for that, we try things out. And so again, the experimental approach is still there. It's still going to take a while, but with AI, what we can do is we can move some of the little constants in a bit, and that could have a dramatic effect.
Well, maybe it's because I live in California, but I talk to people who are much more excited about this stuff than
I am very excited.
I wonder if you.
This is me being excited. I'm just saying the difference between excited and like freezy, irresponsible hype.
I just want, and I appreciate that, but I just want to know if you either have anything to say on that or any counter to it.
Yeah, I think I'm also on the more optimistic side of this. We have one of our company, Cambrium, they optimize protein materials, and now they test thousands of new candidates every week in their lab. And they brought a product to the market in like 2 years, like really selling it at scale. And like back in the days, that would take much more years, and even also, it's not a drug. That's maybe also the caveat. I think, For us, obviously, in the materials, like the approval process is much quicker. So when you've done the computation and it has the material properties, yes, there's some tests you need to run, but it's not like these very lengthy clinical trials that cost lots of money. So I think thereby you can also show earlier that the technology actually works really well and reduces costs, comes up with new material properties you would otherwise not be able to come up with. And I think from the clinical trial side of view, I think there needs to be more done, and we just haven't figured it out except actually running clinical trials, which is very costly and long and expensive.
I know you have something.
I just want to resonate with that because AI actually cuts down a lot of time of the basic work we were doing even 10 years ago, looking for the publication, maybe from a cell culture, somebody sneezed on, we found a target and maybe a protein. It took so much longer, even just to find the target, a right target. And to, in longevity, even if you're a mouse, we have you covered right now. It's all done. Like you can live healthy, very long, with great hair and everything. But I think at the end of the day, why is it so slow and so costly? Because of the phase 3, and which is not based on AI yet, which I hope it will. I think in clinical and the clinical simulations will, at some point of time, be seen by FDA also as a powerful tool to not to go to emergency approvals as it was the case in COVID, which, I hope it will be done better in the future, although faster, more efficient, and that's what takes so much time and money. The last part, the bottleneck, that is, in my opinion, really not dependent on the AI-based drug discovery or the folding. Even another bottleneck we are forgetting, even if it's the best target and it seems to work, the synthesizing part is also a bottleneck because there's a limited amount of companies who do that and do it properly. So I think there are also other ways which we can, solving the problem will face in front of barriers that you cannot move because it's over-regulated by somebody else who is in charge.
So I just want to respond to that because, and again, I realize I probably give the wrong impression. I'm an optimistic, right? And let me just calibrate. When I did my PhD thesis, I actually wrote programs that tried to read the literature, and all the stuff I dreamed of. I have that all now. My chemists, we do that every day. We have deep conversations, GPT-4, exactly as you said, and you can have incredibly intricate conversations, and it's amazing. And then it's completely speeded that up, right? And in terms of manufacturing, so like I have a company that we make proteins, 1 amino acid at a time. So these things, and I agree with you about the caution on clinical trials, and I agree it could be improved, of course. But all I'm trying to point out is at the end of the day, there's this step which we don't want to remove, which is like, okay, it works in silico, it works in a chemical assay, it works in a cell culture, it works in a mouse. Now go see that it's safe in people and that it works in people. And yes, there are people who are working on that process is so inefficient, you can make it a little better. The inefficiency is to just go and recruit the right people for a study is vastly expensive. AI can help with that. So you can help with pieces of it, but there's always going to be this tough piece of like, now go try it in people. And because we are all responsible, be a little careful about how you're going to try it in people. That's going to take a while. But all these things could be sped up. They're not going to be as fast as you're getting a new material to market because they are like, we don't care if the material breaks, fine. But I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist. I'm just like, I'm a realist.
I want to get to some audience questions, but before we do that, very, very quickly, I wouldn't be a good journalist if I didn't ask about the risks of this, right? There's a lot of talk about bioterrorism. I don't know. Can anybody just give me like a one-liner on what they think about that?
I'm very embarrassed to say this in public, and like, don't tell anyone. But There are tremendous risks, but it's not AI. So there are papers that should not be published. They get published. There's work that's done that I don't know why it's done, right? And this is work that we all find out about, like gain of function research on some pathogens, right? This is work where you say, oh, an interesting intellectual question. Could I make a more virulent, more transmissible, more dangerous virus, right? And we know how to do this. You didn't need AI, right? And I won't tell you, but there are papers in the literature that I look at them, and my friends look at them, and people in biosecurity look at them, and I apologize, but like, what the hell? Why was that published, right? And this did not require AI, right? So AI might, to me, like, I've been doing it for a long time. AI might have dangers. Those are not the big dangers, right? The big dangers are, like, we've seen, like, a bad pathogen can, like, our entire civilization is in danger, right? So there are risks. They're out there. Now, you can do surveillance, and people do surveillance. You don't talk about it a lot, but it's done. When I had a company where we made DNA, if somebody orders certain bad DNA sequences, in the US, you don't make them. Other ones in the US, you notify some people. There are, but again, it doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's just in the open literature, it's there. So there are risks, but they're not the ones people are looking at.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Does anyone have any questions?
Just quickly on this one,
yes.
I think we're having always double standards with AI because people are always talking about all these risks, and I mean, yes, they are real, but like we're not talking that much about like the risk of not using AI, because ultimately, I think if you think about every year we prolong like drug discovery, longevity, applying AI in the mobility space where a lot of people die, like, in other spaces where we have a shortage of labor, like there's so many positive opportunities of using AI that have a really measurable impact on society, like reducing the number of people that die, make life longer, make our life more comfortable, that I think we should really spin the narrative and focus on those, build these applications, and also prove wider society that yes, there are risks with AI, but like the benefits are so much larger, and we should be maybe slightly less be influenced by like science fiction and all these edge cases.
I'll just put in, there was a talk at the Broad a few weeks ago I saw on YouTube, a wonderful senior scientist, and the title was 2 drugs that have saved each 100 million lives. And so, your point is really well taken, which is like there is a cost of not doing what we could do. Yeah. That imagine if we hadn't done the COVID vaccine. Right? I mean, you take that for granted. I watched that work over like the 10 years when nobody knew why they were doing that work or could, right? But if that hadn't been done, we don't take for granted we got a vaccine in a year. Yeah. That's never happened before.
And now that mRNA is it's being used for cancer vaccine, like skin cancer vaccines.
No, there's stuff happening all the time, and over my life, I've watched certain cancers go from death sentence to just chronic disease. One of the 100 million lives was the HIV cocktail that took that from a deadly disease to a chronic condition. So medicine's important, and AI helps.
I know we have audience questions, right? Should I just give you, or you got it, Okay, cool.
Hi, I'm Andrew Steele. I'm a longevity scientist like Evelyne. I wrote a book called Ageless, if anyone's interested to learn more. And my question to the panel is, I think when we have these discussions about AI, we quite often overlook the data that you need to feed the AI to actually get some answers out. And I think protein folding is a fantastic example. The reason we've been able to, quote unquote, solve that problem, caveats aside, is that we have this enormous database of thousands and thousands and thousands of protein structures to train the AI on. And in longevity science, there's a very fascinating experiment being proposed called the Million Molecule Challenge, where we get a bunch of nematode worms, and because they only live for 2 weeks, you can do a longevity experiment much more quickly than with human beings for obvious reasons. And so if you get hundreds and hundreds of dishes of these things and watch them with a webcam and drip different chemicals on them, over the period of a few years, you can try out 1 million different molecules and combinations of molecules. That would be a fantastic AI data set. So that's just an example. So I wanted to ask the panel, what would be your dream data set to drive your field forward in order to build an AI that's going to really make a difference?
So when you talk, again, I've done warm work, and the experiments you talk about they're starting to happen. And so there's this other thing which, again, I haven't heard anybody talk about out loud yet, but there are certain things that you have to have a hypothesis and then you test it out. There are other things where I'm just going to try everything, right? And there are fields where like that's infeasible. but you have to watch carefully. They can become feasible. So, I sponsored some work at the Broad where when the UK Biobank releases their latest data, at night we now just run programs. In the morning we have, here's the 50,000 candidates we got off that, 50,000 PhD proposals or drug starts, whatever. There are now some experiments, like you're talking about C. elegans, but there are also molecule things you can now do where I don't know which gene, I'll try them all. I don't know which transcription, I'll try them all. Well, that's 100 million experiments and 10 billion measurements. Yeah, I can do that now, right? And with all that data, I can analyze that now. So we're actually getting to the point. I've been following Jody since 81, right? And we're getting to a point. Now the problem is we live a long time. Experiments take a long time, right? So it's hard, right? You need proxies that will happen faster. The worms are great, but everybody always worries like that worm, that's really different, right? But again, there's been some things that carry over. But I think you're right. I think that, and so the answer is there are experiments that have been unfeasible that are going to become feasible. It requires care to choose them, but they're there. But the data sets are, to me, it's like, I want to understand biology. Let's just do every gene. I have to do that in every cell and now in every organism. But start doing that, look for the generalizations.
I think for us, I think what would be tremendous if we would finally clean up all our healthcare data, all our EHR data. I mean, there it's not even that the data is not there. It's often there, it's just not connected, it doesn't have the same IDs, you can't identify it's the same patient coming in again. Not all the data is written down or stored in a structured way. I think if you could do that at scale and break the silos there would be so much to do. We have one company in the breast cancer screening space that has built that data set in that specific vertical. It's very niche, but just seeing kind of the insights we can get from that data and how we can then, do much better screening is tremendous. So I wish we could do that for kind of all fields. And kind of the sad thing is that in theory, the data should be there. I mean, even if we go to the doctor, right, we realize that people don't talk to each other, data doesn't transmit. Now, imagine a machine could look at all this data. This would, really improve healthcare, but also probably give us a lot of new interesting insights.
And based on that, further development of data set that will include really the maximum that we can have for a digital twin of a patient, from omics through epigenetics, through radiologics, through all the data you can get, and on top of that, hopefully also continuous measurements, right? So from all the wearables, which hopefully will also improve, and finally also influences of epigenetics. So also the factors from the outside, how can we capture that in one platform and collect it longitudinally, so we finally have better biobanks to fuel into LLMs.
So I just want to be optimistic for a second. Exactly what you said. I used to be yelling at everyone about that about 10 years ago. It's gotten better. At least
it's getting better.
No, I'm saying it's like, at least in the U.S., like I'm part of, like everybody's part of, like one of these projects called, like, All of Us, right, where all of our data is actually there in the data sets, right, and we're looking at it. But one thing to think about is, and this is where your experiment is relevant. So now we're getting to the point, and again, I literally was crying about this a couple of years ago, but we're getting there, right? But even if you know every natural experiment done with every human who's around, that's still only a tiny set of the set of experiments you want to look at. And so that's why you actually need things like your worm thing. Like you need that too, because if you look, there are things you're not going to find naturally in the data set, but you want to find. So you need both. You need that data set. You also need to do what you're talking about.
Any other questions? Do you want to? Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Mirza from Toronto, Canada. Just a different take on Andrew's question there. In terms of patient data, actual real patient data, I'm not talking about synthetic data. Do you foresee maybe a need for a Bill of Rights at the human level to say, oh, you know what, as a patient, yes, I consent to my data, whether my electronic health record or just my data overall, to be used for this technology, whether it's an LLM or a biobank, whatever the case may be, right? Like, how can we better contribute to getting real data from actual patients at the forefront?
So again, there are 3 or 4 programs. I mean, I can tell you, I've signed all this stuff because there is that. I'll tell you, again, I'll give you the happy answer and the cautionary thing. The happy answer is, luckily we have this now. Right, again, I can point you at 3 or 4 programs where we're getting, because you want to do this, you want people in general, and then for a particular thing like, oh, that cancer, you actually want to get everybody with that cancer, right? And the best example I can tell you is that there's a particular study I know and guys I know where there's a very rare heart defect that happens in infants that has to be fixed immediately. And survival used to be terrible because nobody could ever see very many of these cases. They're so rare. And in the US, at least, they gathered the data, and people got to look at the whole data set, and survival went up crazy. It's great. The downside, not the downside, but a negative point is, so I only know US laws, I don't know European laws, but in US laws, it's very funny, there's strict privacy protection. So like, I can't, my post office box is protected. But when I went through all the training that you all go through for this, I basically said, wait a second, I'm looking and my DNA sequence isn't here. Oh yes, these rules were written in 1986. So of course, so it turns out that like all the protected information, my PO box, my phone number, not my DNA sequence. Interesting. So regulation has not, I don't know, maybe Europe's different, but it has not kept up. And the only other problem, I know in Israel, right, I worked with people who for years and years and years and years and years were trying to get access to Clalit data and to, and eventually they finally get it. And so I think there is this trade-off. But to me, I think like in many things, I think the consensus is, okay, you should have laws in society that make sure like insurers can't turn you down because they looked at your sequence. But yes, as humans who want to live healthier and longer, we all just contribute our data and then it's available. And, are there risks? Of course. But as you said, right, on the other side, like there are cures that won't be found without that because there's no way the most brilliant scientist without access to all the human records isn't going to find it.
So so we're over time. We're going to do some networking. So I think it's best to just walk around and we can continue this conversation, which has been amazing. And these are great questions. I feel much smarter. I also feel very happy for the mice. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much.